Rattled by External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj's plain speak on the Doklam Plateau situation, China today stooped to a new low. An editorial in the Global Times called her a liar. The Chinese media was back to threatening India with conflict, refusing to mutually stand down at Doklam. Sushma Swaraj had made it very clear both China and India should back off simultaneously from the Doklam Plateau. India Today's Anant Krishnan is in Beijing and he sends us our top focus story. If you need proof just how rattled and shaken China is by India's firm stance in the Doklam standoff, sample this. Already frothing in the mouth for weeks against a measured and calm India, the Red Army's mouthpiece, the Global Times, India's External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj for her remarks in Parliament on the Doklam standoff. The Chinese media stooped to a new low to call Sushma Swaraj a liar. And then again issuing the latest in a non-stop series of violent threats, making China look more like a neighborhood bully than a peacefully rising Asian power that it claims to be. The Communist Party-run editorial threatened Delhi with military action. Global Times editorial said, and I quote, India should abandon its long-term fantasy of the Doklam area and withdraw its troops, failing which India will have to face military action. Ruling out simultaneous withdrawal, the Chinese media said that China will never engage in what India calls is double withdrawal. The editorial on behalf of public opinion reiterated that China cherishes peace but not at the expense of lost territory. This article shows just how frustrated and unnerved China is. With Anant Krishnan in Beijing, Bureau Report, India Today. India Today correspondents are at the India-China border and the line of control, actual control. I have Padmaja Joshi who joins us from Neoma. I have Shweta Singh who joins us from Nathula in Sikkim. Manjeet Singh Negi joins us from the Mana Pass in Uttarakhand. Geeta Mohan with us from Delhi to give us a perspective. Padmaja, I want to understand from you, Eastern Ladakh. Now we've seen Chinese incursions take place, whether it's in Depsang or Chumar. What's the situation? That has happened in the past. What's the situation today?
Of late, people said that China seemed to be on the down low. They did not have any overt act of aggression, Gaurav. But what has taken them aback is for China to have brought up Ladakh in the middle of this entire standoff in Bhutan. So right now the general feeling is that maybe they plan to up the ante over here, but there's confidence at the same time that we are fully prepared, that you have the army over here, you have the ITBP over here. Any misadventure by China will be addressed in full measure. Also, at the same time, there is something which is very noticeable, Gaurav, is the development of infrastructure in the entire region. So you've got this area which was plagued by bad roads. Electricity is still a huge concern, but at least there are efforts to try and get Solect city, especially in the border villages, because at the end of the day, Gaurav, it's also a huge psychological problem that people on this side of the border had when they saw across the kind of infrastructure that China had managed to build, and they did not have regular electricity, they did not have proper roads. So all of that is being worked on at quite a feverish pace from what we witnessed in the afternoon.
Absolutely, and China could well do to remember the Battle of Rizangla, and that's in this part of Ladakh. Battle of Rizangla, where 120 brave Indian soldiers held back an entire brigade of the Chinese army in 1962. Major Shaitan Singh got a Paramveer Chakra posthumously for stalling the Chinese advance. I would now want to go to Shweta Singh, who joins us from Nathula. Heart of action is in the Sikkim sector. Shweta, lots of changes on ground zero, and China, that reminds us of 1962 at all times, Shweta, should well remember 1967.
Yes, the 6-day war of Nathula and the 10-day war of Chola, where China had to actually recede back into their territory almost by 3 kilometers. Now, Gaurav, here I want to remind you of that Chinese idiom which says that one mountain cannot hold two tigers. China knows very well that in the Asian region there is another tiger as powerful. It is India, and that is why these tactics. The basic thing that separates India and China in this war of propaganda, where not a single shot has been fired, yet there is a danger of war looming all around, is that while the Chinese government has been actually feeding its media to go ahead and actually wage a war which is not there, the Indian side is completely different. The people here realize that. The army here makes sure that the media does not go out of its way and report things about a troop build-up or how the Indian army is trying to tackle the Chinese menace. And that shows that while India wants conciliation, India wants cooperation, it is the Chinese side which is trying to just rake up issues which are non-existent, Gaurav.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where China could do well to remember that 62 was a different story. 2017 is completely different. No warmongering happening on the Indian side. Very measured response coming from India, whether it's the government or even the commentary that's coming from India's side. Why this desperation on the Chinese side? Why is China so rattled? But let me now take you to the middle sector. Let me take you to Mana. I want to quickly bring in India Today's Manjeet Singh Negi. Manjeet, जो ज़मीनी स्थिति है, जो बाराहोटी का ये इलाका है, जो मिडिल सेक्टर का इलाका है, यहां इस समय क्या स्थिति है? क्योंकि कई बार यहां कहा जाता है कि आईटीबीपी यहां पर ज्यादा है, सेना उतनी संख्या में नहीं है. क्या यहां भी हमारी सीमाओं को उतना सुदृढ़ किया जा रहा है?
देखिए गौरव, चीन की एक रणनीति लगातार रही है. जो भी सरहद भारत से लगती है वो इंच इंच जो बढ़ने की उसकी रणनीति है लगातार, वो यहाँ भी दिखती है. हालांकि इस वक्त जहाँ पर मैं मौजूद हूँ, माणा गांव है, आखिरी गांव है चीन सरहद से लगा हुआ, तिब्बत से लगा हुआ है. 1962 से ये रास्ता था चीन में व्यापार का, लेकिन 1962 की लड़ाई के बाद यहाँ ये रास्ता बंद हो चुका है. 3 एक्सेस हैं यहाँ से, माणा, नीति और बाड़ाहोती. और अभी की हम बात करें तो इसी साल जून महीने में यहाँ इससे लगा हुआ जो बाड़ाहोती का इलाका है, वहां पर चीनी हेलीकॉप्टर देखे गए हैं. 3 अटेम्प्ट जून महीने में चीनी हेलीकॉप्टर ने कोशिश की थी बाड़ाहोती की. और चीन की कोशिश, जैसे कि आपको मालूम है गौरव, लगातार वो कोशिश करता है कि हर बॉर्डर पर एक ऐसा इलाका, डिस्प्यूटेड इलाका एक्टिव रखा जाए जिस पर कि वो अपना दावा बनाए रखे. इसी लिहाज से नीति माणा का इलाका, जो चमोली का जो इलाका चीन से लगता है, तिब्बत सरहद से लगता है, वहां पर भी बाड़ाहोती का इलाका जिसको चीन एक्टिव करने की कोशिश करता है. हालांकि यहां पर जहां पर हम माणा में मौजूद है, यहां पर हमारी जो आईटीबीपी है उसकी काफी बड़ी मौजूदगी है. आगे 40-50 किलोमीटर का जो इलाका है वहां पर बड़ी संख्या में आईटीबीपी की पोस्ट मौजूद है. पीछे जोशीमठ की अगर हम बात करें 40 किलोमीटर 50 किलोमीटर पीछे, तो वहां पर आर्मी की पूरी ब्रिगेड यहां पर मौजूद है. तो तैयारियों के हिसाब से सेना और आईटीबीपी की काफी मौजूदगी यहां पर है. लेकिन चीन लगातार कोशिश करता है कि इस बॉर्डर पर भी, इस इलाके में भी एक ऐसा इलाका एक्टिव रखा जाए जिस पर चीन अपना दावा करता रहे.
So far the situation has been that China has been making incursions into Indian territory. This is the first time that we see India is silent. India is absolutely quiet. It's China that's making a lot of statements. It's China. Does it appear very rattled? I have my colleagues on ground zero. We'll get to all of them for more details. Geeta Mohan also joins us. But first, I want to talk about Pakistan. Clearly appears to be fishing in troubled waters. From a sudden spike in ceasefire violations by the Pakistan army at the line of control to pushing in more terrorists. And now Pakistan's High Commissioner in India, Abdul Basit, meeting both ambassadors of China and Bhutan in India. While details of the meeting are still not in public domain, finer aspects yet to filter out, the timing is very curious. But if China and Pakistan think that together they can rattle India, they couldn't be more wrong.
Pakistan adding fuel to the border fire amidst the India-China standoff along the line of actual control. Pakistan envoy Abdul Basit needling India further. A clear interference in the ongoing Doklam row. Meeting the Chinese ambassador to India on Wednesday and Bhutan's ambassador to India the next day. India today has learned that the focus of the meetings was the current border standoff at the India-Bhutan-China tri-junction. The strengthening of this anti-India axis is a big worry for India. China has been trying to garner support for its transgressions in the region, and Pakistan is now attempting to leverage that crisis by engaging China and Bhutan in New Delhi. Security forces believe Pakistan is working in tandem with China to create pressure points along the India-Pakistan line of control, even as India strengthens its defences to deal with the Red Army's belligerence along the line of actual control. As China provokes along the Sikkim border, Islamabad is keeping troops busy at the line of control.
India only wants status quo, okay, what was existing earlier. Even in Bhutan and China, there is an agreement, I think 2012, where they have said that till the boundary dispute is resolved, status quo will be maintained. So China has tried to change that status quo. Both Bhutan and India are right in those.
With the Pakistan army now targeting Indian children and schools at the border, a sharp increase in the ceasefire violations and infiltration by terrorists, several hundred kilometers of our border is on the boil. Is India ready to counter the dual duplicity of Beijing and Islamabad? With Ashwini Kumar in Nowshera, Bureau Report, India Today.
So what's this dual duplicity of Beijing and Islamabad, or should I say Rawalpindi, all about? I quickly want to cut across to our Foreign Affairs editor, Geeta Mohan, for more on this. Geeta, what details do we have? What was this meeting Abdul Basit had with the Chinese and the Bhutanese ambassador all about?
Well, Gaurav, what we're looking at is Pakistan trying to leverage the tension between India and China at this point in time. While diplomats say that it is no big deal, some of the Pakistani diplomats saying that it's no big deal, that the Pakistani ambassador almost on a regular basis meets the Chinese ambassador. But the fact of the matter that these meetings are coming, and it's not just the Chinese envoy, he also met with the Bhutanese envoy, and the focus of the discussions were Doklam, clearly goes to show that that Pakistan over here is not just trying to poke its nose or meddle in what is purely a tension or a standoff between India and China and Bhutan, but also will be reporting back to headquarters. And like you rightly pointed out, headquarters certainly is not Islamabad, it is Rawalpindi, on what is really happening and what the current situation is. There is no way that Pakistan can get a real sense of what's really happening from Islamabad, and hence Pakistan High Commissioner Abdul Basit activated over here to go and find out what is really happening and how best can China leverage Pakistan's support, and how best can Pakistan really leverage the tension between India and China, is why I believe, Gaurav, the meetings took place on Wednesday and Thursday.
China can try, Pakistan may try. There is no way they are going to succeed, and India's response at the line of control very clearly proves that. There may be a very tense standoff at the Doklam plateau between India and China, but the moment Pakistan upped the ante, it increased ceasefire violations. India paid back in kind, and from what sources say, with interest. But why is Pakistan doing that? Well, take a look at this India Today cover story, and you must read this India Today, which very clearly says China's new chick. That is exactly what Pakistan is today. China's new chick. Pakistan is China's client state. It's not just about the China-Pakistan economic corridor, and we'll tell you more about that on India First, the second half at 8:30. But before that, Padmaja Joshi, my colleague, was talking about infrastructure development on the Chinese side. What's happening on the Indian side? Well, India has also pushed in some armor along the line of actual control. India is also building up infrastructure as quickly as India can. Take a look at this ground report sent from Neoma in Ladakh.
The war is largely psychological as far as the India-China border in Ladakh is concerned. The biggest issue here is development. China has made sure that their infrastructure develops at a rapid pace on their side of the border. But the smallest development activity takes place in the villages that are on the Indian side of the India-China border, and immediately China tries to thwart it. But despite that, all of these developmental works continue unhindered, even including the development of roads, the construction of roads, or the laying of telephone wires. It's been more than a month in the tense standoff between India and China over Doklam, but now China is deliberately trying to provoke India by getting in Jammu and Kashmir, saying that Ladakh is a disputed territory. So at Demchok, which is the border point between India and China, is this behavior by a suddenly aggressive neighbor having any effect at all? In fact, this time is one where tourist activity is at its peak in this entire region of Leh Ladakh. Most of it goes on unhindered, despite what many people are talking about in hushed whispers. The only difference that this is making is that plenty of Chinese tourist groups who were booked for this time to come to the Leh Ladakh region have cancelled their tours. With camera person Zahir Bagh in Ladakh, Padmaja Joshi for India Today.
So is there fear in the air? Is there any kind of apprehension on ground zero? Padmaja Joshi spoke to a number of people, not just in Leh, but in other parts of Ladakh. Let's listen in.
नहीं सर, कुछ नहीं, डर कुछ नहीं है सर, क्योंकि यहाँ फौजी लोग बैठा है ना, उसके लिए हम लोग को कोई डर नहीं है सर। कोशिश कर रहा है घुसने की, पहले बोलता है किसी इधर आ रहा है, वही बॉर्डर में कुछ करता है, ऐसे बोल के मेरा सुना है, हम लोग तो नहीं दिखाए सर।
The army is there. There is no reason to fear, is what people on ground are telling India Today. Is the situation exactly the same in Sikkim? Shweta, I was in Sikkim last week, and all along there were a large number of tourists, both Indian and foreign, going all the way up to the China border, going all the way up to the Nathula crossing. Is it exactly the same today? And Shweta, China's duplicity is so clear. It may have stopped the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra from the Nathula route. Trade is still open.
Yes, Gaurav, absolutely, you're correct. Though there has been there's been a change because it's the rainy season, and there've been landslides right from here to Nathula Pass. So there are a lot of people who were waiting to get there, but they have not been given permits. In fact, there's a magisterial order which says all media coverage of the border is banned. Everybody who wants to go to the border villages and speak to them, the villagers have been personally instructed not to speak. Though yes, when you talk to them, when they venture towards the city or when they venture towards one of the trade routes, they tell you that everything is normal and they trust the army completely. Sikkim, as we all know, voluntarily became a part of India much later than the other states, and they trusted India and they hated China so much. And that was the reason why this happened. Now, I spoke to a lot of Tibetans here, Gaurav, and they completely recollected 1959 when they had to leave their homes and had to come and settle in Sikkim and other parts of India. Now, they crave to be back home. They say their home is just a couple of hours away from Gangtok, from the city where they stay, where they live. But yes, they have no way that they can go back there. They say that the only way China can be set right, the only way China can change is if India stands there with Bhutan and says they will not allow China to advance and take advantage of a small country which cannot defend itself. Now the entire environment here is in favor of the stand that India is taking, and yes, everybody is completely against what China is doing, and everybody blindly trusts the Indian army, Gaurav.
Oh, absolutely. India Today correspondents will continue to get you the latest, and that's the spirit on ground. That is what spurs the Indian security forces. But while this is happening, the country stands united. There is pressure from two sides. There's pressure from China, there's pressure from Pakistan. How are our netas behaving? Now, one would think when there is an external threat, the country would stand united. Perhaps the people of this country stand united. What about our political netas? Why can they not unite and keep India first?
चीन ने कहा अभी कि I want to mediate in Kashmir. किसी को तो आपको इस्तेमाल करना पड़ेगा, बातचीत करने। हम थोड़ा कहते हैं उनके हवाले कर दो।
मेरी राय है कि कश्मीर इज इंडिया एंड इंडिया इज कश्मीर, और ये हमारा इंटरनल मैटर है, ये हमारा इंटरनल बिजनेस है, और इसमें किसी का कुछ लेना देना।
Indian netas speak in multiple voices. on the clear and present Chinese threat. Former J&K Chief Minister Farooq Abdullah even going to the extent of advocating China's role in Kashmir.
आप ये कहते हैं ना तीसरी पार्टी, ट्रंप ने खुद कहा कि I want to settle Kashmir problem. हमने थोड़ा कहा उससे. चीन ने कहा अभी कि I want to mediate in Kashmir. मैं किसी को तो आपको इस्तेमाल करना पड़ेगा बातचीत करने. हम थोड़ा कहते हैं उनके हवाले कर दो.
Soon to refute Farooq Abdullah's remark was Congress Vice President Rahul Gandhi. But even he didn't leave the opportunity to slam the Modi government.
मैं अब काफी समय से कह रहा हूं कि नरेंद्र मोदी जी और एनडीए की पॉलिसीज ने जम्मू कश्मीर को जला दिया. मेरी राय है कि कश्मीर इज इंडिया एंड इंडिया इज कश्मीर, और ये हमारा इंटरनल मैटर है, ये हमारा इंटरनल बिजनेस है और इसमें किसी का कुछ लेना देना नहीं.
National Conference Chief Omar Abdullah soon rushed to defend his father, terming his Kashmir rant as free speech. But Congress wasn't the only one slamming Farooq Abdullah.
थर्ड पार्टी का क्या मतलब है? क्या फारूक अब्दुल्ला साहब चाहते हैं कि भारत जो है पाकिस्तान के आगे घुटने टेके?
फारूक साहब नसीहत ना दें. भारत की स्पष्ट नीति है कि हम किसी की मध्यस्थता नहीं बर्दाश्त करेंगे.
नहीं, मेरी राय में फारूक अब्दुल्ला को कोई तीसरा कंट्री जाना चाहिए. जो हमारी देश की बात नहीं करेंगे उनको पाकिस्तान में तो मानेंगे नहीं, तो कोई तीसरा देश ढूंढना पड़ेगा.
The government meanwhile made it clear, no third party intervention at any cost. Then what is it that pushes netas like Farooq Abdullah to continuously suggest otherwise? To put politics first and not India's interest. With Supriya Bhardwaj and Anindo Banerjee in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
Perhaps it's now time for everyone in this country to come together. There is an external threat on our eastern flank and on our western flank. At least now our political masters should come together and say India first. We'll continue to track that story very closely. In a bid to choke Pakistan, the Donald Trump administration in the United States of America has decided not to give the installment of $350 million reimbursement, coalition support fund to Pakistan. US Defense Secretary Jim Mattis made it very clear that he cannot certify that Islamabad has taken sufficient action against the Haqqani terror network. This decision comes as US President Donald Trump's administration is exploring hardening its approach towards Pakistan to crack down on terrorist organizations like the Afghan Taliban and the Haqqani network that are targeting American and NATO interests in Afghanistan. I quickly want to cut across to India Today's Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan, who joins us with the latest on the story. So Jim Mattis refuses to certify to the US Congress that Pakistan has taken sufficient action against terrorism. That's a huge slap on Pakistan's face, Geeta.
Well, Gaurav, a lot of people had questioned us when we said that the country report of the United States of America is going to be significant, that this is a new administration, that the statement might be absolutely and exactly the same as 2015, but it matters the most when these decisions have to be taken. That Syed Salahuddin's designation as global terrorist, or for that matter, putting Pakistan in the joint statement as a country that supports and provides safe havens to terror networks is certainly one of the most important factors for the decision that we hear tonight. A huge decision, huge blow to Pakistan. $350 million have now been, by Defense Secretary, been reallocated to various other coalition funds, will not be going to Pakistan, is a huge development. This is what we were waiting for, that the Defense Secretary needed to certify whether they trust Pakistan or not. Certainly, there is no trust now between US and Pakistan.
Geeta, this is just step one. So while the United States on record may be saying that this step does not prejudge their review of their South Asia policy, but Donald Trump is very different. He's saying, what was America doing all these years, trusting Pakistan when Pakistan spreads terror in Afghanistan and kills American soldiers? That's one part of the story. The second, when America reviews its South Asia strategy and funds that are going into Pakistan, clearly it's not good news for Pakistan.
Well, absolutely not good news for Pakistan, Gaurav, but one has to be realistic and understand how the Americans have played into the hands of Pakistan in the past. We have seen stern action by the Obama administration as well. But what happens later is the realization that Pakistan is needed for any kind of communication and transportation into Afghanistan. They still have forces on the ground. They still have boots on the ground. And that's the reason why, at the end of the day, Pakistan arm twists the superpower of the world, Gaurav, into funding them, into providing the military aid. So while now a defense secretary is saying that he cannot really certify that Pakistan does not support terrorism or is doing enough against Haqqani network, we will see some action from the Pakistani end to show that they're working against the Haqqani network, and it could come back to the same thing, that the Americans decide again to provide funds to Pakistan. So we will have to, right now the decision looks great, but we will have to wait and see whether it will hold good or not.
Okay, we'll look at the fine print in detail and also subsequent steps that are taken. Geeta Mohan, for the moment, many thanks. And now for that big India Today magazine exclusive. The aggressor, China, is fast expanding on Pakistani soil. And no, the relationship between Islamabad and Beijing is not that of diplomatic equals. It's an authoritarian China that's trying to make a backdoor entry into Pakistan-occupied Kashmir via the China-Pakistan economic corridor, making Pakistan a virtual colony, a virtual chick of China at this stage. Take a look. A partnership underpinned by hostility with India. For decades, China has armed Pakistan with military hardware, deployed its economic power firmly in Islamabad. But Pakistan has overshot the mark this time. Yes, the country has handed itself on a platter to China.
गवादर पोर्ट जब चीन से
Pakistan's leadership touting its latest partnership. The Beijing-funded China-Pakistan economic corridor. But India Today has accessed a tightly guarded Chinese report.
This study by a Chinese university and accessed by India Today is
a report that shows how Islamabad has surrendered its economy to its giant neighbor. Through this widely advertised project. Pakistanis out on the streets over the China-Pakistan economic corridor.
Murdabad, Murdabad! Murdabad, Murdabad!
But none probably knew the real scale of Chinese ambitions. India Today reveals them here, bit by bit. Year 2015. Beijing pledges $46 billion to link Kashgar in the Chinese region of Xinjiang with Gwadar along the Arabian Sea via Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. A proposed network of transport routes, highways, ports and power plants. Blinded by its pipe dream to squelch India, Islamabad succumbed to the temptation.
This study by a Chinese university and accessed by India today is perhaps the most sweeping assessment till date undertaken by China of the China-Pakistan economic corridor. And this study is revealing for several reasons. For one, it corroborates what Pakistan's Dawn newspaper published as a leaked master plan, a draft master plan of the CPEC, which envisages a sweeping takeover of the Pakistani economy by China.
In the beginning, the CPEC was not formally the Silk Road initiative, but later on it became the flag project.
It offered its territory to China, ostensibly for infrastructure development. Little did Pakistan realize it may end up as Beijing's colony. An internal report accessed by India today reveals China's plans to gain a sweeping control over the Pakistani economy. That's right, a sweeping takeover through the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor Project, the CPEC. An internal assessment of the proposed 20-year project by Beijing's Renmin University shared with India today. A blueprint of China's possible stranglehold over large swathes of Pakistani economy. This top secret report warns of high stakes. Risks from terror, risks from instability, risks from ethnic conflicts, from terrorism and political infighting in Pakistan. The report has completed a risk assessment of ethnic and provincial conflicts in Punjab, Sindh and Baluchistan. In its recommendations to the Chinese establishment, the Renmin study has warned against delays in executing the CPEC project. A failure, it said, would heavily impact President Xi Jinping's One Belt, One Road initiative.
This study by a Chinese university...
The report corroborates the CPEC's draft master plan, conceived by the Chinese and Pakistani policymakers. Remember, their bilateral trade shot up 15% to $13.7 billion after 1 year of the project announcement. Regardless of Pakistan's own deficit of a whopping $12 billion. China's blueprint for the Pakistani takeover is much broader than initially anticipated.
Have the Pakistanis, in fact, given you any assurance that India would be allowed to have transit through Pakistan? Because the interest India would have is how you can transit through to Central Asia, to the Gulf, through Pakistan. And the answer to that, but that's not for us to say, that is for Pakistan to say. So where is the connectivity argument then taking us?
According to the draft master plan, 6,500 acres will be leased to China for farm projects. As many as 17 projects have already been announced for the power sector. Besides, Beijing is planning to overhaul Pakistan's creaky rail and road infrastructure. India is watching the situation very closely. New Delhi has refused to endorse President Xi Jinping's One Belt, One Road initiative, primarily because it passes through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Gopal Bagle, the spokesperson for the Ministry of External Affairs, said, and I quote, "No country can accept a project that ignores its core concerns on sovereignty and territorial integrity. Concerns over a potential Chinese expansion are mounting.
As you look at CPEC, it's part of a larger pattern. This pattern essentially involves intensification of strategic linkages between China and Pakistan. And this doubling down of China's strategic investment in Pakistan has very negative implications for us.
Pakistan appears to have compromised its own sovereignty with President Xi's One Belt, One Road passing through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. China has willy-nilly become a part of the Kashmir issue. With Anant Krishnan in Beijing and Sandeep Unnithan in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today. In 1949, when Mao Zedong's army, the PLA, marched into its western province, then its latest province, Xinjiang, it was called the western newest province. But now that western frontier is Pakistan. Why? Many say it's because of the port city of Gwadar in Balochistan. Its strategic importance will catapult Beijing into a wider player in geopolitics. Here's a look at why Gwadar is so significant in China's colonial conquest of Pakistan. No longer discreet. They want us to know how close they've become. A rare joint display of their adversity towards India. All on the bedrock of Chinese President Xi Jinping's modern Silk Road push. The proposed China-Pakistan economic corridor, financed by Beijing's $46 billion loan, and their grand plan hinges on a small ancient port, Gwadar. A dusty town of less than 1 lakh people, tucked along the Arabian Sea coast in Pakistan's insurgency-hit Balochistan province. Excavators clearing rocks, laborers toiling under police and military protection. President Xi's big gamble in rapid progress. Take a look at Beijing's new launch pad. Ostensibly for export to West Asia and Africa, slicing through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and restive Balochistan. The leaked documents reveal China has secured a 23-year tax-free deal for its companies operating out of Gwadar. Beijing's takeover blueprint also plans out coastal tourism in Balochistan, international cruise clubs in Gwadar, running all the way to the Iran border, aided by Islamabad. Beijing's takeover is in full swing in Balochistan.
ये जो बर्ड्स हैं अभी 3 लगे हुए हैं, 120 की कैपेसिटी है. जब 120 बर्ड्स लगेंगे और जब 120 बर्ड्स में 100 कम से कम रोज 3-4 दिन के लिए 120 बोट्स शिप्स लगेंगी, तो उधर से आपका जो गेम चेंजर एस्पेक्ट है वो शुरू होता है.
Accessed by India Today are internal reports of Beijing's Renmin University. China's Pakistan takeover, the Gwadar deal, forecast an annual cargo turnover of 300 to 400 million tons, more than 10 times Pakistan's biggest Karachi port. A shipping lane is already operational for Chinese vessels bound to West Asia. For India, bigger concern centers around China's military footprints.
As China steps up its efforts to emerge as a major maritime power with a major footprint in the Indian Ocean region, we should anticipate that we'll have more such facilities, and Gwadar is a prime candidate.
Sinister dimensions of China's collusion with Pakistan. Gwadar is likely to become Beijing's second overseas naval base, after Djibouti along the Gulf of Aden. So Islamabad may trumpet its friendship with China, but Nawaz Sharif's bluff has been called out by widespread protests across Pakistan. Agitation against the proposed China-Pakistan economic corridor. There are protests in Gilgit, in Baltistan, in Sindh, in Baluchistan. We get you this ground report. Pakistanis are out on the streets to protest what China touts as its project of the century.
ऐसा न हो कि तुम्हारी ये दोस्ती दुश्मनी में बदल जाए, तुम्हारी दोस्ती का हाथ चिकना चूर हो जाए, तुम्हारी दास्तां न होगी दास्तानों में.
Beijing has set itself out on Pakistan's uncharted waters. A country with a history of civil unrest and political instability. Masses in Pakistan are up in arms again. Some see it as a Chinese assault on their livelihoods.
सीपेक रोड बनने से पहले हमारे आबा व अजदाद ने जमा पूंजी करके कुछ ज़मीन ख़रीदी थी, जो सीपेक रोड बनाते वक्त वो हमसे ले लिया गया, जो सीपेक रोड बन के अभी आवाम मुतासिर हो गए हैं, जिससे मुआवजा किसी को मिला नहीं. 1.5 साल हुआ है.
Others feel their Prime Minister has hijacked the entire project for his Punjab province.
सीपेक बन रहा है, यहाँ दुआ हम खाएंगे, लेकिन पैसे वफाक वाले नीचे पंजाब लोगों को मिलेंगे, हमें कुछ भी नहीं.
But Pakistan's ruling elite seems blinded by China's big promise. A promise to pour $46 billion to build a network of roads, rail, power plants and ports. For the record though, both sides struggle to keep their promises. But this time, ambitions are overriding reasoning. China is overlooking the peril. Protesters, spluttering insurgency in Baluchistan, and traditional tension between Pakistan's civilian and military leadership. And Pakistan is ignoring the will of its own people downright. Anil Kumar for India Today. There's been a huge drug haul at the line of control at the Uri checkpoint between India and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Baramulla police have seized a large quantity of drugs from the cross-LOC trade point in Uri. The driver has now been arrested. Investigations are underway. From what sources in the Jammu and Kashmir police are telling India Today, there's heroin, there's brown sugar worth 200 crore rupees in the international market. This was recovered from a truck that was coming from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. The drugs were hidden in fake cavities, specially fabricated to put these boxes. And there you see images of the drug haul. There was very specific intelligence on the basis of which the drugs were caught. The National Investigation Agency in the past has said drugs from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is used to fund terror in Jammu and Kashmir, and that is why this whole becomes extremely important. We'll track that story very closely.